When I did the calculations and realized how much protein I should eat each day to achieve my goal of optimal health, as in breakfast, lunch, dinner, and even snacks, I couldn't help but freak out a little. Today, I show you how I was able to feel comfortable and confident in calculating how much protein to eat each day. More and more research points to the fact that higher protein is needed for us as we age, go through illnesses, surgeries, extended periods of stress, chronic immune issues, inflammation, pregnancy, the list is long, and that protein requirements have been significantly underestimated. What's worse is the added misunderstanding when it comes to the RDA, the recommended dietary allowance. It's mostly interpreted as a recommendation of how much, when in actuality it's the recommended amount that represents the bare minimum to keep our body out of a diseased state. Over the years, I found that it wasn't just me who initially couldn't shake the concern when it came to increasing protein. The insidious thought and worry that maybe I'm hurting my body by following the suggestion of increasing complete proteins, aka meat, was shared by many individuals I've worked with over the decades. My guess is you will feel the same way today too if we jumped right into calculating and following the new recommendations of how much protein we should eat each day for optimal health. So we're gonna start off with a little research to abate that worry, remove the misinformation hurdle, and this way when we walk through how much, you should be able to skip the freak out. There's a very good reason for the knee-jerk worry when it comes to the idea of eating a protein diet way higher than you probably ever considered. The reason we have angst is simple. It's because we keep hearing, reading, seeing the messaging. Meat causes disease, bone loss, cancer. It'll kill you. Even with all the mounting research over the past 2 decades showing the immense benefits achieved by consuming high-protein diets, we, particularly Americans, haven't changed our protein intake, and the research shows that our protein consumption has literally remained relatively unchanged. A bunch of other crap that damaged every system we seem to be worried that protein will hurt still make its way into our body. It's kind of interesting how we choose to villainize some things as dangerous while freely taking other items in that aren't even nutritious. They're just food substances. I shared in Reframe Part 2 how my consumption of Little Debbie's, Pringles, donuts, and I forgot to list Snickers because, they had peanuts in it for protein. Yet I was afraid to increase my complete protein, especially meat. This lack of change may in part result from confusion over the purported detrimental effects of higher protein diets. Again, that sure was my case. My information gap was wide. I had a list of all the warnings I received in my education over the dire repercussions of consuming meat to the point that I restricted it to my detriment. This type of information gap is exactly what I'd like to help bridge when it comes to Simplify Self-Care emails, articles, and now videos. If you're new here, I'm Mo, and this is 52 weeks of Simplify Self-Care. This is your year for self-care. It's a good place to start. It's where I share the secret behind the Simplify Self-Care processes success. If you're ready to head down the self-care path, join the Simplify Self-Care email list where each week you'll receive the link to the 52 weeks of videos in order so you too can reap the benefits of the step-by-step layering of focused actions. Everything will roll out in the exact order for effective and efficient results, plus you'll get PDFs, scripts of each video, references, and added tools, placing everything you need to set your body up to achieve your goal in your hands. For those of you who are now on the first of the 3 biggest nutrient influencers, protein, we're first facing the elephants in the room. The scary stuff that comes to mind, like doesn't high protein cause bone loss, cardiovascular issues, renal issues, cancer? That's just name a few. Where do we get those ideas? Scientific research. Scientific research, rightly so, takes years, even decades to come to a conclusion. And then Once it's done, it often takes many, many more years, even decades, post its completion to trickle down to the establishment and then our everyday life. And after that, everyday use starts to point to the flaws and the benefits. The benefits slowly percolate and hopefully stick around, and the flaws slowly come to light and dissipate. This space and the time where good researchers there, slowly trickling, can make it seem like there's more conflict and competing views than there really are. When it comes to a hot topic like protein, you'll be able to find a ton of conflicting opinions. But when you follow the research chronologically, the tendency and direction becomes clearer and clearer. This creates a lot of confusion initially and even pushback of the newer points of view. Another reason for what seems to be conflicting opinions is some hold on to what was at the same time while others delve into what's new. There's also special interest groups having influence, and it's why I always say, studies come and studies go. I read many research papers, books, and regardless of what article, book, research, I apply the thought process of how my amazing body works. For proteins, my body needs all 20 amino acids to be provided on a continual basis to live optimally. Of those 20, I need to be absolutely sure the 9 essential ones are always provided. 3 especially, we'll get that in an upcoming video. But every day, the 9 essentials must be there. To simplify it for my life, complete protein covers all those needs, providing my body the raw materials to make everything it needs. First, knowing why I should put the effort into including protein each day was key for me, which is why I made the video Protein, Why, What Kind for you before this one. It helps make sense of knowing why how much you eat actually even matters. And of course, that video pointed out 2 extra pluses. Protein is on the good mood food list as a precursor to our happy hormone, like dopamine, and it's the first of the 3 biggest influencer nutrients. When it comes to choosing studies, I've always said studies will come and go, and opinions and headlines are something of which to be wary. I've actually done a 3-part video series years ago for practitioners detailing why that is and how to help their clients who come in with interpretations of research, mostly from headlines. And you know what? I'm going to place that video series on a playlist. Maybe I'll call it reference or video oldies but goodies. I don't know. Look for it. I'm bringing this up because being in the field for decades, the first thing clients would do after we calculated protein was to return with piles of studies. Natural. And of course, exactly what I would want them to do. And that's the perfect client, the one who's thinking things through. It's also the time that opens the door to show them how to see research. When you are around a long time like me, you see how slowly over time, new information becomes more readily available and more widely accepted. And you think, whoa, that client was so willing to embrace that suggestion. Then you realize, well, it's because I've been suggesting it for over 15 years now since the research came out. Which, it's funny, when I run into old clients, the most common thing they say is, we've just been talking about you. We seem to think that every single thing that you said 10 years ago is actually now true. So although the protein research has been around for a while, it's still in its infant stage of getting out and being applicable. The newer studies will always be in the minority, then decades later accepted. My goal is keeping up with the ongoing research and studies so I can leverage the scientific knowledge, using it now to achieve my goal of optimizing my body and sharing it along the way. Today, I've decided to lean heavily on one study because it's a great one that streamlines the number of studies you may go through to bolster your comfort level when it comes to taking on more protein. It's titled Dietary Protein and Muscle Mass, Translating Science to Application and Health Benefit. It's listed as the first study on the reference section of today's article you'll find linked below. It'll help you if you're trying to gain an overview of what was, what is, when it comes to protein recommendations, and it's where I pulled the equation from to calculate how much protein for the general population. Again, general baseline. What I'm wanting to communicate up front is there's just so much to unpack and break down when it comes to protein consumption. I'm also fully aware of the avalanche of studies that villainize protein and would like to help you be aware that the titles and the accusations don't hold up when distinguishing the quality and the processing and the accompanying foods and lifestyle. There are logical explanations, good updated research supporting increasing complete protein. For my purposes, the most important being that it improves and helps optimize my health throughout my life. To smoothly, confidently get to how much protein is recommended each day, I've decided to handle this humongous undertaking by pointing a few things out, then providing you with this much larger than usual list of references. That way, having the references at your fingertips mean you can refer to them. This is the most efficient and effective way to eliminate that freak out moment and the hesitation due to worry, and you'll be more likely to be comfortable and confident calculating how much protein to include. I do intend on providing examples in the future videos on types of complete proteins, quality of, preparation of them, because that does matter, and it changes how your body receives the protein and is used by your body. That's an important health factor when we've chosen to actually increase the consumption of it. Because protein research has made leaps and bounds in the past decade or so, and more studies are backing up its importance, you'll notice an increased clarification on quality, processing, and preparation in the general media too, which is great. My hesitation, the things that kept clamoring in the back of my mind when I did my calculations, included things like, well, what about the increased risk of colon cancer, breast cancer, heart disease, osteoporosis? I heard so much about meat causing all these bad things. And I knew to successfully shift my diet, I needed to have the answers to those questions. Not as easy as it should be. And this is what I spend my days doing. I'm quoting this from May 2019. It validates that we are bombarded with the wrong information even now. Still in the media, clinical practice, and within academia, it's perpetuated certain risks are associated with the protein content of balanced mixed diets for healthy adults. Common criticisms of greater protein intake or with the types of foods dietary protein is derived from are detrimental on bone, renal function, low-grade inflammation, cardiac disease, cancer risk. These concerns are unfounded with regard to protein content of the diet. Let's run through a quote or two from a few studies to gain some insight. Then we'll walk through a chart I made for you where I simplified the mathematical equations. I've actually calculated and did the math for you. Because I got to tell you, when I pulled how much protein so I could share with you, I was like, what? I knew it could be simpler. So I did the math and I put it in a chart for you. I'll pull the chart up on the screen later and place the link below so you can get it in PDF format and print it out. Let's look at where the research stands on things we worry about, like, will increasing my level of high-quality protein hurt my bones? Although it was once thought that the acid-generated components of high-protein diets were detrimental to bone, an updated review of the literature shows greater protein intake is not harmful to bone. Additionally, further understanding of the mechanisms behind how protein modifies bone metabolism and the interrelation with muscle function will provide future therapeutic targets in forestalling bone loss with aging. That's important. Moving on to renal function. Diets higher in animal and plant protein do not impair kidney function in the U.S. adults. Conclusions: diets higher in plant and animal protein, independent of their dietary factors, are associated with cardiometabolic benefits with no apparent impairment of kidney function. Now, inflammation, joints, vascular, and heart health. Chronic inflammation is thought to be a major characteristic of aging, which may increase need for substrates, specifically protein, to support anti-inflammatory processes. Protein intake has inversely associated with changes in inflammation and oxidative stress score. Chronic low-grade systematic inflammation is thought to be a major characteristic of aging. Inflammatory status, such as those of older individuals or in chronically inflamed disease states, may lead to an increased need for substrates, i.e. protein, to support anti-inflammatory processes. Meeting protein needs in aging population may therefore be important not just for maintenance of lean mass and physical function, but also for counteracting inflammation, oxidation, and their downstream catabolic effects. Several studies have observed that pro-inflammatory cytokines are inversely associated with muscle strength and physical performance, both of which have been positively associated with at least adequate protein intake. I want to point out, this is a very important piece to emphasize again, the type, quality of protein matters. A subject for another day. We are focused on high quality unprocessed protein, not processed meats, smoked, powdered bars. Our focus is on high quality complete protein. Now, the big one for me, cancer risk. This was the biggest one for me. Having had multiple surgeries, removing masses from my teens onward, the idea that I could possibly cause more growths was a big hurdle. So meta-analyses show no link between overall dietary protein intake and incidence of colorectal or breast cancers. Higher protein intakes may, however, exert a protective effect on post-diagnosis survival. Greater emphasis must be placed on dietary protein consumption in the context of overall nutrient-dense, healthy food choices when considering relations to health and disease, as the aforementioned potential connections are influenced heavily by food item quality, more so than macronutrient profile. So the bottom line, protein provides our bodies with all the pieces, the amino acids, including most importantly, the essential ones that we must ingest for our body to have access to. Those amino acids assemble all the structural proteins, enzymatic proteins, hormonal proteins, defense proteins, contractile proteins, storage receptor proteins, transport proteins, of which we need all of for our bodily functions. So the plethora of studies that claim the high consumption of complete protein will damage and kill us, when they're actually unpacked, they're not backing up their headlines. By taking the time to unpack each study, look at the type of complete protein, for instance, smoked, preserved, processed versus unprocessed. It's high quality we're talking about. And dairy versus animal. Dairy causing more problems than the complete animal protein. Again, all for another day. To simplify and make sure my body had what it needed, I'm just focused on initially incorporating high quality, unprocessed protein. We exponentially impact the positive that it contributes if we're exercising, if the other foods we eat around it are appropriate and nutrient dense. For today, we are staying focused on incorporating high quality, complete proteins and calculating how much that would be on a daily basis with our chart. Also important is our own bio-individual ability to break down complete protein. It's why even after calculating how much I needed to support my ability to break down protein, I slowly increased it, but at least I knew what I was aiming for. This cut out the confusion, eliminated my overwhelm, and I had a focused action plan. If you've watched This Is Your Year for Self-Care, I outlined the secret of achieving any wellness goal, placing our focus and effort on homeostasis. Complete protein is the first of the biggest influencer nutrients, and it positively supports many of our body's mechanisms that we depend on for that balance, that homeostasis. We need more of it in times of stress, surgeries, pregnancy, aging, and so on. We place our focused action on high-quality protein now that we have worked on and continue supporting the balancing of our 3 organs, 3 muscle groups, reducing junk that goes in. We aren't thinking about adding a bunch of processed protein on top of a bunch of stress, inactivity, low nutrient food that's negatively impacting our body. So if you're new here, please head over to that Simplify Self-Care so you can layer on each of those that I just mentioned, because many of your systems experience improvements when your 3 organs are humming along. Same thing with digestion improves. It'll help break down the protein we're talking about today. It improves the muscle-skeletal balance, offering you a balanced framework, which means movement can add benefit, which helps with your protein. Getting to know your brain a bit. You use the reframe technique to support the increase in good mood foods. In part 1, reducing the junk food or negative habits. In part 2, then you start to say, okay, I'm going to increase my high quality protein. It's a priming you to be ready to increase the protein in a way that's highly beneficial to your body. So one last research paragraph. Emphasizing the benefit of increasing our protein to optimal levels, in addition to the dietary protein and skeletal muscle considerations, the protein leverage hypothesis suggests that protein underconsumption increases appetite drive in an effort to ensure sufficient amino acid intake. The unfortunate effect of this response in the absence of increased protein intake is excess energy consumption, overeating, and resultant positive energy balance. The fact that over 120 million Americans have some type of cardiovascular disease, over 29 million are believed to have type 2 diabetes, and approximately 5 to 7% of the young adult population meets the diagnostic criteria for metabolic syndrome, illustrates the need to change how we structure feeding recommendations. If you are ready for how much protein, here we go. How do we know we are getting adequate amounts? We're going to pull directly from May 2019 Dietary Protein and Muscle Mass, Translating Science to Application and Health Benefit Study. The one I'm leaning heavily on. Now we're going to use it to create our guide for how much. The RDA reflects the minimum amount of dietary protein required to meet indispensable amino acid requirements. If the American adult population as a whole consumed protein at approximately 1.6 grams per kilogram per day, as advocated in recent review from one of the more prominent laboratory groups in its field, this would still represent an approximate 7 to 19% of total energy intake, certainly reasonable based on the current AMDR for protein. Indeed, even increasing to 2.53 would still fall within the 10 to 35% of total energy from protein suggested by the AMDR. AMDR is the acceptable macronutrient distribution ranges, and this would provide ample opportunity to optimize muscle health. That's what I'm looking for, optimized muscle health. Why? Because optimized muscle health is linked to just about every physiological system. It plays a central role in whole body protein metabolism by serving as the principal reservoir for amino acids to maintain protein synthesis in vital tissues and organs. Furthermore, altered muscle metabolism plays a key role in the genesis and therefore the prevention of many common pathological conditions and chronic disease. The maintenance of adequate muscle mass, strength, and metabolic function has rarely, if ever, been targeted as a relevant endpoint of recommendations for dietary intake. It's imperative that factors directly related to muscle mass, strength, and metabolic function be included in future studies designed to demonstrate optimal lifestyle behaviors throughout the lifespan, including physical activity and diet. And that's what we are doing here, providing our body with the essentials, the motion, the emotion, and the nutrition, beginning with our body's biggest 3 influencers, the 3 organs, 3 muscle groups, and now 3 nutrients to optimize your body's ability to more effectively and efficiently be in homeostasis. I created this chart for you using the above equation. I ran the equation rounding to the whole numbers to simplify. And each line is 10-pound increments. Once I got the grams, I converted them to ounces, giving you the rough guide so you have a general idea of how much to consume. Research gave us a formula to work off of for the general population. We can work up from there, but also keeping in mind more is not always better. There comes a point where the muscles can only use so much at a time. And then it's the timing of the consumption that's the better focus. Here's one last chart that maybe might be helpful. It's from Learning Library. And there you have it. Top of the acceptable macronutrient distribution ranges of 2019, which is said to provide ample opportunity to optimize muscle health. If you made it all the way through, good on you. You've got the research, the references, the reasoning, and now the chart to simplify and clarify the how-to when it comes to how much protein you should have each day. Placing what you need in your hands to use, discuss with your practitioner, advocate for your well-being, making the inclusion of adequate high-quality protein that provides raw materials to improve your mood and every other physiological and biological process in your body. It's now a can-do. If that's what you decide you want to, then you've got this. I'll see you next time.